everyone, it's Jackie from Rose Gold Library, and I'm very excited to say hi to y'all. It's been a quite interesting time, mainly because when I was reading this, it was earlier in the year, and I felt that my brain fully has functioned because I started reading a nonfiction book. You know, like the saying where it's like, I can feel the frontal lobe developing? Yeah, that what was happening when I was reading the library book by Susan Orlean. And I did not really attend. Let me rephrase. I didn't really want to read this book in the sense that I never paid attention to it until I was in the library catalog one day at my local library, and I was like, you know what, let me read this. And I was like, okay, great, why not? And this is when post-grad, when I'm over here reading nonfiction book for fun, yeah, that's when the frontal lobe is developing. And so the library book is what I categorized it, and also like on Google and Amazon and all other retailers, as well as what the library website was like. But I kind of put this into the three top categories of true crime, historical study, U.S. history, which are kind of like, this is the first three things that will come to mind to this. And this book is about the burning of the Los Angeles Public Library, the Central Library, on April 29th, 1986. So it was in the late 80s when the Central Library, if you ever visit Los Angeles, it is one of the biggest libraries that we have here. It's in downtown LA. I've been there once, and I try to avoid it as much as possible because it is not fun. The freeways scare me. The idea of a freeway scares me. And downtown LA is just full of it. But it was one of the hottest fires. It reached 2,000 degrees and burned for more than 7 hours. And this book describes the day of, the days after, and the history of the LA Public Library and what it means to be a library. And also trying to figure out, at least the main suspect, who was it and why. There was a lot of tension in the book where I'm over here like getting invested, since I'm trying to do the 75 soft challenge, where you read at minimum at least 5 to 10 pages a day, which is not hard to do. Read 5 pages is not really an extreme amount. And then I realized, I got into this, and it's only 336 pages, and I read it. I will admit, I was also a bit lazy at this time. I was reading more fanfics than actually reading a nonfiction book. So I read it for the last 20 days of January. This is a book that I read in January, right after, if you look up on my channel, The Princess and the Frog book. So yeah, this is one of a recent book. It was published in 2018. So there are certain things where I'm like, wow, was this published like just yesterday? But then I was like, this is pre-pandemic times, because it clearly did not mention COVID and stuff like that. It was written before 2020. But it felt so real and visceral reading about Harry Peake, one of the primary suspects that we delved into, as well as just the history of downtown LA itself, how the structure of the buildings was hated at the time because it was too, I'm not sure if they use the exact words, gaudy or too extravagant for the Central Public Library. But it also deals with the fact that libraries are important, and reading this in January and currently living in the US, the idea of a library is so important now. And reading is so important that the history of Los Angeles Times Library, there were multiple people who were the city librarian and head librarian. There was an entire chapter, especially towards the end of the book, but also throughout the books, of how the women were really empowered to be the city librarian, as well as during a time where women did not have a lot of power. And it was especially mentioned how a lot of librarians, especially female librarians, were seen as either, to quote Bridgerton, a spinster. They had no, to quote, what was it, the Pride and Prejudice, I have no prospects. But they still survived, and they still took care of the community, as well as things that you don't think about until you're reading it. It's all the way back then, like having classes for children, and also having time, like story times for little kids, but also having little things such as sanitary products for a lot of people, but also certain things that, let's just say, at the time, their version of fan fiction being printed out, and people are just looking at the picture and being like, yeah, I know you printed out this not safe for work thing. It's fine, I've seen things worse. Thank you for using the library resource, though. But then on the flip side is people calling in to see what is in the newspaper's Wordle. Well, not Wordle, but like the newspaper crossword puzzle. Or, I guess, yeah, also Wordle as well. I also got this from my local library to support not libraries. One of my favorite quotes in this is on page 289, chapter 30. Humankind persists in having the desire to create public places where books and ideas are shared. And that is very prevalent in my life, mainly because I don't really have a lot of third spaces. So having a place where books and ideas are shared really brought that home. And the library is a third place for many people, including myself, especially when I was growing up. So another quote, which is I usually try to do at least 3 quotes, but this one made me laugh so much. It was about the Los Angeles fire and like the aftermath in the 80s, early 90s. And people in the Los Angeles area were responding to it, just like regular people who weren't at the scene. And they said, another commentator wrote, I have news for everyone. This stuff doesn't just happen in the library. Welcome to LA. And especially with, this was also happening during the fires as well, the California SoCal fires, especially around the Los Angeles area. How that, I will admit, it is really funny and sad to think about while reading, and potentially filming as well, this part, because I went on and off with reading and filming this and recording, yada yada. And it was just kind of like a moment of, oh, fire is really prevalent. Obviously theme in the story, but also like destruction, warmth, and all that, and what's happening around me, and just welcome to LA. And that was like one of those like morbid dark humor things that I found absolutely phenomenal, because this was written in 2018, and yet here I am now in 2025. Yeah, I'm gonna date the video, so when I look back on it in a couple of years, I hope I don't get emotional reading this. And this is also just a book and about real people. this is obviously, as I mentioned before, nonfiction, but it's talking about real people who are still working in the downtown LA public library, and interviews, and people who are witnessed this tragedy. Imagine, well, not really imagine, but just witnessing and the fire burning for more than 5 hours at 2,000 degrees. And another quote was that, I'm gonna summarize, but it's in chapter 2, page 25, when Suzanne, the author, was talking to a forensic, specifically arsonist expert, how at that time it was there was a phenomenon that for some reason it was the perfect condition, that the fire was basically clear, and just the amount of oxygen within the library, and especially in the archives, that it was just burning through everything. It was like the ideal temperature. And it was also a mystery trying to figure out who was this person going into the back rooms or the staff rooms, and who started the fire, because it was also in the 80s, late 80s, and the security was different in the sense that they knew that it was also, what is it called, a tinderbox. It was ready to blow out at any moment because it's old books, as well as anyone can go in and out of the staff room at the time. But yeah, you just witness also Henry Peake's life, just to see how he came from a small town not far away from Los Angeles, and like many people during the golden era of Hollywood, went and tried to, become a star, just like Pearl. Please, I'm a star! Yeah, I apologize for anyone listening to that on loud. I do apologize for that. But yeah, so my thoughts on this, I feel like I'm rambling, but I can't really specify it enough that it is one of the books that you need to read, on how human it is. I felt a deep connection to humanity while reading this book, and I'm trying to read actually more of this author, Suzanne Orlean. If you can see it on the cover, it's also the same author as The Orchid Thief, which, if you've seen the movie, let me see if I remember, is it Steve Buscemi? Yeah, it's called Adaptation. Yeah, I remember reading parts of the book. Yeah, it's a 2002 film, Adaptation, and it is based on the book The Orchid Thief, the true story of... No, it's not Steve Buscemi. I apologize. It's Nicolas Cage. I apologize to Nicolas Cage. For some reason, Steve Buscemi and Nicolas Cage are the same person in my mind because of one D&D in high school that I played, where we had one of the horses that took my D&D party, and it was a running joke that the horse name was Steve Buscemi and another character named it Nicolas Cage. So the horse responded to two things. Our DM was always yelling at the same time. But anyways, it's Adaptation with Nicolas Cage, Meryl Streep, and Chris Cooper. Yeah. Anyways, it is a book that was based on that. Based on Suzanne Orlean's real book, but Meryl Streep plays her, which is iconic. I love Meryl Streep. I hope she is not problematic. I just loved her in Mamma Mia and The Devil Wears Prada. But funny enough, she also mentions that towards the end of the book, how it was also kind of like surreal that people would come up to her and be like, "Oh, you like orchids? Here's a person that I know that likes orchids. Oh, I know you from the X, Y, and Z movie, adaptation movie." So yeah, it was kind of like a weird thing that also how Susan Orlean was just amazed how people know her from the movie but not like her book, but also vice versa. So yeah, I'm thinking about reading more of Susan Orlean, and I hope that I get to have my own personal copy of this book. I think in my future references, or not references for my other YouTube videos, is that I'll decide if I want to have and keep a copy of the books that I borrow from the library. Because one, I also love the photographs that are mentioned in this book. The photos in the book are real historical documents from the fire and the effects of it. Just seeing how there was a fireman going into essentially melted and burnt books stays living rent-free, but also just how towards the end of how there's some librarians going with his little burrito, his little donkey, going to communities so they get a chance to read books borrowed from the library, kind of in like the little mobile libraries. And as well how in my own little rating system, which is honestly arbitrary, let's be real, this is just for me to document, to literally archive my own thoughts. Yeah, archive I own. But I gave this a 4 out of 5 because this made me look at libraries with more praise and more appreciation. And just like, I think I only put 5 for books where it truly, like, earth-shattering changed my life. As well, if you look on my other video, I kind of did an arbitrary system. Let's be real, I'll probably look back on it. But yeah, I totally recommend this book. I feel like I'm yapping. This is more of a casual conversation because I don't really delve deep into nonfiction books that much. I'm trying to read more nonfiction this year, but let's see, which is really ironic since I'm trying to read more classical fairy tales. But yeah, the library book, it's a great book if you're interested in true crime and just like mystery, like real life mysteries, but also dealing with humanity. I feel like this video has gone longer than it needs to, but that's okay. If you believe, or if you made it this far, please comment down below and see what are your thoughts. I feel like I can articulate this a little bit better. This recording has been a long while since after I finished reading this book, so it's not as fresh, and I've read a couple more books now, and this is before I had a job, or at least before having a permanent job now. So yeah, I was reading this back to back with fan fiction in between, so probably my brain is a little mushy. But yeah, it is a fire book, and also gives off the same vibes as 1984, at least in this cover design. I love the simplicity of it, and if you really want to support the Los Angeles Public Library, I recommend going to the website and purchasing there. It's not sponsored, by the way. I just think that's really cool. And yeah, thank you so much for reading. I really appreciate you watching this video, and I hope to see you very soon, and keep reading. Goodbye, everyone, and I hope that your day has been well. Bye-bye!